Hi, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here with my lifelong friend, Michael Desharnais, who's I've been mispronouncing your name our entire life, but it's okay. You've been mispronouncing mine. So, for those of you who don't know, my buddy Mike, we were literally like born next door to each other. You know, I can't remember a time when I didn't know Mike, and he taught me how to play Dungeons and Dragons, so it's all his fault. You actually taught me how to play V&V, if you remember.
Right.
And then we as children we played, didn't know what we were doing, made up the craziest, stupidest adventures, and then we kind of got separated after high school. Life gets in the way. Go to college here. I moved across the country, and then 2000 we kind of got back together again and made a regular role-playing campaign, and that's where you created your character Marshall Strong.
That's right, 2000. Wow, I can't believe how long it is now.
Right. And so for those of you who don't know, Mike made a comic called Marshall Strong. Here's the link in the Kickstarter with another buddy of ours, Dan Sen. He started Argo Comics, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, Dan was ahead of the indie curve.
Yeah, Dan, phenomenal. It's funny because I was asking him how do you make money off of comics? And he goes, I don't.
It's a labor of love.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So Dan is a pioneer, and nobody has had like the stick-to-itiveness and the dedication. His Argo 5 is up to getting close to issue 50, I think.
Right. It really is one of the long, it was before the days of crowdfunding. He was self-publishing it.
Yeah.
And then he went into crowdfunding. And I remember just going to a comic convention in Garden City, the Eternal Con, and I hear John. And I haven't seen him since like we were 15 years old. And he's got comics out, that looking professional and slick. It was neat. And here I am thinking, I'd like to make a comic book one day. And guy I went to comic book store shopping with has already been doing it for 10 years at that point.
Yeah, I think he was doing it before like digital printing. Like he was doing it when you had to do it the old school way. It was more expensive.
Lettering with a pen, if I remember.
Yeah, and you couldn't. I don't think you couldn't make the books to order, so you had to print up a number in advance and lay out the money and take a chance on yourself.
So let's start at the beginning. Mike and I. I was running the game master in Villains and Vigilantes, and Mike made up a character, Marshall Strong. And tell us about Marshall Strong, the character.
Okay, Marshall Strong in John's Boo's universe was is the leader of chess. In my universe, he's the leader of Apex. I just stole your idea, just for the comic book, changed the name because I was worried that they were other.
Right. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, chess is an organization that came packaged with the game, and when you're shelling out all your money and you don't want anybody get mad at you, which is one of the reasons why I've been trying to contact Scott Bizarre, the owner of Fantasy Games Unlimited, to see if we could do a cross promotion. Because wouldn't it be cool, Mike? We get 6 or 7 issues, and then we take all our characters, make a V&V module.
That'd be awesome.
We're trying to do everything on the up and up. So Mike didn't want to use chess, which was their Shield organization.
Right. Chess is basically Shield, and I don't know if people know how expansive your V&V universe is. It dwarfs Marvel and DC. It really does. The number of characters.
Well, I'd like to say it's because it's been. I want to say one mind, but I put in this comment here that Paul Ferrantino is also a player character.
Oh, hey, Paul.
In our game, his main character was he had Dreadnought originally, and then Magnum, but Magnum and Marshall Strong and Magnum will make a cameo appearance in issue number 2. Don't worry. I was hesitant to use them because I didn't know how you would feel because they're your characters. Paul was like, my character in the comic. What's that? You don't want to sell 1 million copies? That's the way. So Paul is the overpowered brick character. Mike was the patriotic character, and then a third Fred Jan was like the detective character. And it made like a nice juxtaposition, I guess. Because I had to make games for all 3 of these different play styles.
Completely different styles of characters that in in the game. You know, like that. It's interesting that we approached the game completely differently, which is what I think made the team, you know, so much fun.
So I got distracted because I'm easily distracted. I'm like a magpie. But I asked you, what was Marshall Strong like?
Well, Marshall Strong was basically started off as a military psychiatrist who was brought in to screen candidates for the government's top secret program where they were going to use alien technology to create the world's first metahumans, I guess with the idea of creating a metahuman army, giving them the advantage over every other country. And Marshall Strong was brought in to psychologically screen the candidates, because the first round, they didn't bring in someone to screen the candidates, and they created an army of metahuman psychopaths.
Yes.
So
that was our first adventure.
Yeah.
And I believe that 24 years ago.
I remember it like yesterday. I really do. I remember that first game with this being the second round of metahuman experiments.
Right. And
Marshall Strong was brought in to make sure that they believed that the psyche of the individual who was undergoing the metahuman process had something to do with what resulted. So the first characters were deeply flawed and had neuroses and psychoses, and their characters ended up being completely nuts. So then Marshall Strong is brought in to psychologically screen the candidates, and he somehow talks his way into the experiment instead of just screening others.
You proved that you would be the perfect candidate, which you were. Yeah, Marshall Strong's character. Yeah.
Right, and yet he is not immune to one of the hallmarks of your campaigns, which is metahuman psychosis.
Right,
where all the characters are vulnerable because of this powerful process of transforming a person into a metahuman. They're all vulnerable psychologically.
Right, because it's flawed. The human understanding of how to make a paranormal is flawed, which is part of issue number 2. When I started writing my comic, Heroic Tales, keep in mind, everybody, that Mike's comic, Marshall Strong, and my comic are set in the same universe. Keep in mind, I didn't read the final script, so Mike may blow up the planet, and in which case he was never part
of a different direction.
But Marshall Strong will be making a cameo in issue number 2, and now that Mike's given me the okay, I probably will make him like the Nick Fury of the world. So issue number 2 is going to be dealing with getting superpowers, although Mary Sue doesn't realize that she's being roped into doing this for a villain. That's basically the plot of issue number 2. So Marshall Strong got his powers in 1996 in my world, so he's one of the most experienced superheroes, and of course things have changed. People learn more. The government can only keep this a secret for so long. It's starting to get out where superpowers come from. So, Nicholas Gear, you just backed Marshall Strong. Cool. Oh, we got Munchkin alerts.
Yeah. Quick hello. My son wants to say hi. He wants to make his own comic book.
Oh, cool.
He's been inspired by his father and John Bua, and he wants in.
Cool.
All right, run upstairs and I'll put that on for you, okay? So
I just wanted to point out that Cam was another kid at the comic book store that that me and Mike do. And as much as I know about comic books, Cam puts me to shame. This is a guy who loves comics. I keep trying to get Cam on. We would have a fascinating talk. And Nicholas Gear, I just want to say thank you if you back Marshall Strong. Because it's one of our, I think it's like 2 years into our campaign. Your story is set, right?
Yeah, because I picked up the adventure that I picked up was the one with Secret Shogun.
Right.
I thought that would, at the time when I first thought of doing a comic book, I thought of doing I said, I never knew if I get to do more than one. So if I was going to do one issue, that was, I thought that was one of the most exciting
I
adventures
that.
we have. And
everybody took the supervillain for granted. And he just took out everybody. Not only did he take you out, but if I remember correctly, with his samurai sword, he hit you in the leg. And then he hit you in the other, and then he hit you in the arm, and he was just like, I got all night, you know. Right. And you roll the dice, and you're like, oh, you missed again.
Well, not to give anything away, but the comic opens with Marshall Strong having been laid out and blasted out.
I just realized I can't tell about
the event. But it's actually the opening scene. Okay. So it's not. I thought I would start it. I thought I was very Tarantino-like to start it. You know, in the in
media res,
in the past a little bit, and I at the time I thought if I could only do one comic in my life, and I could put that in a glass case, give a few copies to friends, you know, that would be the one I would want to do.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
my son just saw me on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
my son.
Daddy's on YouTube. That's great. That's funny. That's cool.
He's supposed to be asleep, by the way. This goes to show you how plans work out.
She's just like, "Are you on YouTube again?" I could care less. So it's good to have a family member actually excited. The Oni backed Marshall Strong last week. Yeah, James Griffin is another one of our players. So Jimmy and I have been friends since third grade. Mike and I have been friends since before kindergarten. Paul I met in college, and then Jan I met in college. And this was like our core group for a while. And if life gets in the way, people get married, people have kids, and we don't get to play as much as we used to. And the Oni was Jimmy's first character, who I think makes an appearance in your comic.
The Oni makes an appearance, a very significant appearance in issues down the road, but he is on the variant cover for issue number 1, as is Magnum on the cover for the variant cover for issue number 1.
Oh, okay. And
they will both play significant roles. I have 6 issues done, by the way.
Oh, okay. That was, you just anticipated my question. Was this a one shot?
No. Well, back when I first came up with the idea of, it was like my goal was to see if I could publish a comic before I died. You know, follow through on one goal in my life. I actually have 6 comics complete. They're actually, I think the last one, issue number 6, just has to be lettered. But I started this 10 years ago,
right?
And I started doing it, and you know, the artist I'm working with, Elton Tomasi, when we would finish, he would say, "Hey, want to go on? Want to do the next issue?" I was like, "Sure, I got all the money in the world. I'm in civil service."
So let's put this in perspective. When you started this comic, you didn't even meet your wife, and you definitely didn't have children.
Correct. So, and that's one of the things I got to give credit to Dan Sen. Dan's been publishing for a long time. He's been doing Argo Comics, and then he did Thunder Zone, where he's worked with other creators, literally from all over the world. It's really interesting. And I didn't have the know-how to get my comic in, get it printed, get it, set properly for printing.
I tell you, I didn't know what I didn't know when I first started doing this. And other people are like, "Oh, who are you getting for pre-press? Are you do?" I'm like, what is pre-press?
Right.
What printer are you using? Oh yeah, I guess I got to get. I just started hiring an artist, writing script, getting things colored, getting pages in, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I got.
Right.
And then I found people. So
it's very intimidating if you haven't done it. And so Dan has published so many books. His own books and books from other creators. And that's what, I said, I'm sitting on all these books. I have like 2 story arcs, and it's only I know, that I have them. So I finally am ready to share them with the world. And, thanks to Dan, who's helping me get them to market, get them out to the reader.
Cool. So, yeah, it's cool because you years ago you got a professional to draw Marshall Strong, your character.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what started it all, right?
It's funny, and I mentioned that that interview I did with First Comic News, the guys at G-Man Comics put that up, and I was at MegaCon in Florida. That's in Orlando, Florida. Cam, myself, and his neighbor and friend Mark go down there for the guys' weekend, and you have the artist alley, and a lot of the the big names won't do your own character. I think they're afraid people will use it
as a cover or something like
right,
that.
Yeah, I get some famous artist and then I use his convention drawing as my cover or something. But there was a lot of young art, up and coming artists that were happy to do it, and this is like 2010, I think 2010 or 2011, and there was an artist named Elvin Hernandez who's excellent, and he's gone on. He's done some things, and he's done some commercial work, especially with cards for some of the major card companies for Marvel and DC. He's done a tremendous amount of that type of work. And I remember talking to him that I had my own character and I'd like to get it drawn. And he was like, let's do it. So we talked about the character, and then we were kicking around ideas. And I would explain to him how I saw the character, and he'd throw out some ideas about, oh, you mean like this? And then I remember, you let the artist go to work. They do it, and you kind of come back an hour later or 2 hours later. You don't want to bother them. You want to check and see if they've done your commission. Yeah. And I remember at the end of the day going back, and it was ready. And, he took out and he held up, the first ever drawing of Marshall Strong. And I felt like the rest of the convention, I was walking on air, because this character that I had in my head for years, suddenly I felt like he was alive. Like it was such a cool feeling.
I know exactly what you're talking, because I how badly I draw. Mike knows.
Better than me.
I sent this bad drawing to Renzo Rodriguez, my artist, and then he sent me my character, and then he drew page 2 first, because it was the reveal of the character, and I'm like, wow, it's a real character now.
Right.
Yeah.
It really felt like Mike, once I saw him drawn professionally, and I felt like he could take his place amongst the Superman and Batman and Captain America, but it also felt like it was and I remember he also was the first person to draw Kid Nemesis, who is also in the comic and is basically Marshall Strong's sidekick. And I remember going back and forth, because I have to ask you a lot of questions, because I don't have a drawing to give them. I'm describing something, and I remember, so he knew he did martial arts, and so he said, well, his shoes are kind of like the slippers like Iron Fist would wear. I'm like, yeah, sure, that's good. And I remember Cam and Mark and I were going to go to lunch, and we were just about to leave the convention, and all of a sudden I said, no, not slippers. I wanted to have boots, like high cavalry boots for like a Napoleonic arm. I went running back. I'll meet you at the restaurant. And I remember telling him, and he said, yeah, I can make those boots instead. And I felt like this is the creative process. It's working. I'm part of it. Like it was a good feeling to collaborate with like an artist like that. It felt so creative, and then when I saw the final drawing, I was like, yeah.
I mean,
just like we talked about, boots, not slippers.
Paul brings up, Mike, any of your V&V characters going to make it to the issues? Dynamo Sloth, as an example. Every once in a while, I would do like little side stories. So I made a story set in the 30s, and it was an alien abduction story. People got abducted by aliens, and then they came back with powers. And Mike rolled up his character, and I just remember you used agility as the dump stat. And anybody watching this knows role-playing games. Agility is the most important stat in Villains of Agility. It determines how often you act. So, if you have a high agility, you're going to act a few times. So Mike would.
But also,
I'm waiting for my turn.
I think he had like a carapace or something, like he had a shell that he got an agility minus.
Oh, really? Yeah, I don't remember.
So it was like a quadruple whammy. He was the slowest character ever made. So you suggested the name Dynamo.
Yeah, well, he had electrical powers. Yeah.
And I suggested the name Dynamo Sloth because he was so slow I couldn't stand playing him.
Mike, did you ever show me the commission that Cam got for you?
I don't know if that.
I know you have a binder and you showed me pictures.
I have a World War. It was supposed to be like a Golden Age image of the World War II comics. There's a lot of those like
propaganda,
the Nazi dungeon and the Nazi evil scientist type of thing.
If you send pictures on it, send it to me and I'll put it on Twitter in the where I post this up so we can just see. But I remember you had Rich Buckler. I can't even speak. You had Rich Buckler draw your character.
Well, Rich Buckler, it's funny. He drew one of the Rich Buckler. I knew. It turns out he drew a lot of the comics I liked as a kid.
Right.
But I knew him as the artist of the Mighty Crusaders in 1983 when they relaunched it. And the character that I liked so much was Lancelot Strong, which is where I got the Marshall Strong is inspired by Lancelot Strong. And I guess Marshall, kind of like my love of Westerns, as I talked about.
You know what's funny? I always thought Marshall came from the Honeymooners. Cramden's Delicious Marshall.
What's Marshall?
Mike and I both love the Honeymooners. If you grew up in New York in the 70s and 80s, you love the Honeymooners. It was on Channel 11 3 or 4 times a day. So I don't know why I had that in my head that you Cramden's Delicious Marshall.
That would be a little weird. But I thought Marshall Strong, worked really well. But Rich Buckler did some really nice drawings of various Mighty Crusaders characters for me that are like beautiful. They're like, when he did a convention sketch, he did like a finished piece. He was quite the professional. I know that there's been some controversy with him whether he borrowed too much from other,
that was his thing. He was a chameleon he was fast and he was a chameleon, so he could adapt his style.
Right, and he filled in on everything. So I guess he kind of was trying to do the Marvel house style and the style of those he was filling in for. But sometimes when you go to a convention and you get a sketch, you never know if it's going to be something you like or something you have to hide your disappointment from the artist, which I've had to do. But when Rich Buckler did it, it was almost had like tears in my eyes. It was so beautiful,
So let's talk a little bit about role-playing games. We got like most of us in the chat here. We got Jimmy, we got Paul, we got Mike over here, and then Jan was another member who he got married and we never saw him again. I don't know. It's like a mystery. So
and he's a nice guy, super nice guy, and I like the way he played.
He played, and this is something that Jan liked the mystery and problem solving. Paul just liked to fight and crush, and you liked superheroics. And then Jimmy loves role playing.
Right.
So whenever Jimmy was like
Jimmy becomes the character.
He becomes the character, and a few times me and Jimmy would play, and we'd barely even roll dice because it was just like almost like an improv acting session,
Right.
Because I really like the role playing too. So it was a lot of fun, and I kind of miss because it's been like 5 years now since the core group got together. And but it was just we would meet at my apartment or your apartment or rarely Paul, and I'd make chili and we'd sit, we'd eat chili, drink soda, eat the Funyuns, eat the chips, and play a game. And it was mostly just laughing at like critical fumbles and
what was nice was that I think sometimes when people think of gamers, they think of people who are nerdy to the point of caricature, but the game was kind of just the background. The fun was hanging out,
right.
And the game was a lot, the game was always enjoyable. It was a lot of fun, but it was also it was a cool way to just hang out and enjoy awesome chili and just hang out and get to talk. And the game was kind of like it's almost like playing cards, you know, in that
Right.
it's a reason to get together, and you know, it's a lot of fun. But it was the main thing was getting to see one another and hang out, you know, good times, good times.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it's funny because you know, when we played, it was theater of the mind. So I would tell out this. Very rarely did I draw because I can't draw. So you know, it was acting out the story that might, you know, describe what you're doing, whatever. We would use the rules of the game to facilitate that. But you know, so it was 4 or 5 guys just sitting at a table talking. But when I think back, especially the story that you're putting in the comic, and again, I'm trying not to give any spoilers. I remember it was a comic book. It's an animated movie in my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the choreographed fight. I remember climbing up. You know, I remember Marshall Strong jumping into action. You know, I remember like punches being thrown and sword fights and blocking, and you know, I don't think of dice, papers, pencils.
Right. We were never the type to use like miniatures and measure with rulers. Like, for me, I can understand why some people want to play like more precisely or whatever, but for me, it was more like it was that like that I could see the movie sometimes as an animated movie, sometimes as a live action movie. And if we ever had a misunderstanding with the way you were describing, we would just, okay, do over. Okay, I was picturing this.
Quick sketch, you know, and I would do figures to, you know, you said this once to me, and I used it a million times. You're like, sorry, but the picture in my head is not exactly the same as the picture in your head.
Right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, because I remember as little kids we would fight. No, I have a knife in my hand. No, you had to go into your backpack. Like, you know, I always said like Dungeons and Dragons always seemed like the Dungeon Master versed the players.
Right,
like any way to screw over the players and hamper their fun. And then one day I was just like, no. And then you literally showed me Villains Vigilantes. And I remember, do you remember we sat in my room in my parents' house? We must have been 14 years. Do you remember my first character?
Your first character?
Yeah.
So I remember mine.
What was yours?
I believe my first character was the Eliminator.
Yep, the Eliminator.
My first character, Total Punisher ripoff.
Like my first character was, I thought he was the most powerful superhero because I rolled an 18 and I put the 18 into the strength, and you know, so I'm like, he's unbeatable. You know,
now I have to know.
It was a vigilante. And he had a radio headset so he could listen to police scanners, and then he would just go and beat up criminals. You know, I think I used him twice.
You know, I think before we played together, I had created a character, the Protector, and he had the worst mishmash of powers. You know, like somehow the powers don't go together.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like an acrobat with vibratory powers or something. You know, like it made no sense.
One of the things about Villains Vigilantes that at first, you know, I just accepted it, and then I thought it was the worst thing ever, and now I embrace it. Is it's random. There's different charts in your role, and of course I came up with, I have a house rule section that's probably bigger than the actual rules, and I call it the finagle factor. And I will say this to my dying day: it's better to have a character whose powers fit together than to as they call it, munchkin or min-max to make the most powerful character. I have to address this comment by James Griffin, one of our player characters. Omega Girl was a challenge and then became a true favorite. With that, Jimmy again likes to role play. So Jimmy made up a character, and his weakness was he had no idea what the powers were or anything. He literally woke up during the autopsy, you know, and people are like, what? And all as he knew that his name would Agent Omega was his original name, and then he died, and then he literally woke up during the autopsy as a 14-year-old black girl, you know. And Jimmy was like, "Oh my God, how am I gonna?" And it became one of the scariest, most terrifying characters because who, you know, and playing alongside Paul's 9-foot-tall character Magnum, sidekick, Jimmy role playing a 14-year-old girl from the hood. But they were all, it turns out they were all inhabited by the same spirit that would jump from body and body. But as far as I know, we never finished the Omega story. And then he became Captain Omega, who's inhabiting the dead body of my friend Joe's character, who was a character from when we were 12, 13 years old, crossed over through a like a simulacra of a memory of another. It's complicated, guys. Just go with it. It's superheroes. But I just wanted to bring back the childhood 14-year-old characters for one last harangue. The body died, and then the spirit jumped into this fake body, and now he's Captain Omega.
I don't have I have to play like a Marshall Strong type character. I don't have the nuance to the patience, to.
Yeah, you've switched to a couple of characters, but you always go back to Marshall Strong. And what are Marshall Strong's powers?
Okay, so Marshall Strong has gone through the same government experiment that was defined as the metahuman process, as I recall, and he ended up with a heightened intelligence, heightened agility. Those are the ones I really play up in the book, and I made it, and his, master of many different fighting arts, and he's always, he's armed to the teeth,
right.
So
he has expertise in like small arms and things like
right.
that.
So in the game, I think he had like a heightened strength. I have him in the comic a lower level of heightened strength to focus on more his leadership and his fighting prowess, I guess you would call it. And in the comic is also Kid Nemesis and the Spartan, and Deacon Hammer makes an appearance in later issues. If you remember Deacon Hammer.
Get back to Deacon Hammer. We'll talk about him. I think you know what I'm going to bring up about Deacon Hammer. But and if you remember, you had in V&V you could roll what's called wild card powers, where basically like psionics. So you can make up any power as long as it fits in with the basic theme of psionics. There's another like special skill where you have. So you had psionics. And
yeah, he was immune to mind control, which I do play up in the comic.
Right. So you just made he had this iron will, and he cannot, like, not only you can't be mind controlled, but like you can't be influenced. Like a Venus character wouldn't be able to influence your emotions. You are the iron resolute, and I always thought that was just so perfect for that character.
I think for his personality, that is like key, because what I did was like his weakness and his greatest strength are both mental. His weakness was his the constant fear of like failing others. He can't do the wrong thing, and he lives in constant fear of
I forgot
letting down his teammates.
That's literally your weakness. You cannot do the wrong thing.
Right.
And I remember we were talking about like, what if he does? And I'm like, no, you just can't.
Right. So even when it hurts him, he's kind of has that, that focus, and it's also tied to because he's so singularly focused. That's part of why he's immune to, the mind control and the mental influence, which, by the way, plays a big role in a later issue. I was very proud to work that in.
Cool. Paul, who played with us, he says, funny enough, my kids used to poke fun of me. Yes. But now since Stranger Things and playing Baldur's Gate, they want a D&D session. Sure. That would be fun. As long as they understand it's Villains and Vigilantes, not D&D. But yeah, I used the Villains and Vigilantes rules for a fantasy type game too. That is connected. What's that?
My son recently said to my son is 7, and he said, Dad, you know what game we should play? And I said, what's that? He said, Dungeons and Dragons. Do you know about that one? And
let me tell you.
I always felt a little tear, and we ended up with my son and my daughter, who's 5. We ended up playing a game of Gamma World. And I didn't need the rule book. We just rolled dice for no reason, because whatever happened, that they win.
Roll that dice, yay!
But it was a lot of fun to see them get into their characters. I tell you, it was I think it's healthy. I think especially in a day and age where kids are always on their phones or always on their iPads. It was nice to have a family game where they were doing some acting and they would get really into it.
It's funny that you said that, because everybody started getting married, everybody started having kids. So I had another group that was a lot younger than me, like in the late 20s, early 30s.
Right.
And when they started playing, because I would always be like, Mike would be like, okay, I'm going to, I want to try to see what's behind the door. Okay, roll perception or whatever. And then I would take a piece of paper, crumple it up and try to hit him in the face, open it up, and then whatever you do with that information was your information. But that was the way I conveyed secret information, crumpled up little notes.
Right.
They were like, just send me a text message. And I'm like, no,
no.
We crumple up notes like our ancestors did. If it was good enough for Grandpa, it's good enough for me. And you know what? I cleaned out all my stuff, and I found a lot of those crumpled up little notes.
Well, I remember when you would give the note to someone, like it would be folded up. Yeah. So I might see Jimmy get a note, and he opens it and he reads it, and
he starts counting at everybody. Oh no!
And I remember thinking, what does the note say? That was. By the way, you just reminded me of. Half the fun of gaming was the running jokes that we had for years. Like when you have to roll to save yourself and your chances are very slim. Bye, kids.
And since we have Paul here, we have a term that actually became part of a group who met Paul once called Darber damage.
Right.
Paul's character's his secret identity was Clarence Darber. And he did 16 die 10 with a punch. That's how strong this character was. So he would multiple attack. So he would need 32 10-sided dice, and it was just rolling. And that became Darber damage. So anytime anybody needed a handful of dice, it's like I got Darber damage. And it was funny to see this girl Donna say, "I need dice. I'm doing Darber damage," when she never met Paul. And then in college, you never met this person. I had a friend named James O'Connell, and this guy, he would pick up the
James O'Connell roll
with spit. He like keep the dice, and he would like throw it, and it would skid off the table, hit the wall, and go to the most inaccessible place imaginable. And we would spend the next 5 minutes looking for the dice. And then we would find it, and he'd be like, it just happened to be whatever he wanted. Like, dude, it has to be on the table. So it became, if the dice leaves the table, it's automatically the worst. So we had to teach him how to roll the dice, and that became James O'Connell rule.
By the way, Paul also added up my dice because apparently I don't know how to add.
Paul has a financial job, so he was good.
Look, you just roll. I'll add them up. They didn't feel. And same with James, by the way. James is a good cat. They couldn't bear to watch me struggle to add the the dice up.
3 + 8. 3 + 8. Please. Oh God, somebody rolls. and like counting our fingers to make sure that we did roll the 32 dice. One of our plays is that when I would get home and tell my daughter what Marshall Strong and Magnum had done the night before, it was like, yeah, it's explaining a comic story. Yes. I'll put it in the chat, but if you go to www.villainsvigilantesforum.com, you could actually read some of these stories that I think it's that forum started in like 1999.
Right.
Did Marshall Strong have heightened charisma? I will tell you this: charisma is not a dump stat in a superhero game.
Right. That's one of the reasons he was the leader, because he was also, the one who was like the public face,
right,
of chess.
Would it be safe to say that Marshall Strong is Nick Fury and Captain America merged?
Right. I said, when I was thinking of him, when I did the interview with First. Was a First Comic News, and I was thinking about how I would describe him, and I thought he was kind of a combination of Lancelot Strong, the Lone Ranger, and I would say my brain is blank out, the leader of the Suicide Squad, Rick Flag.
Rick Flag, yes.
Yeah, kind of like a Captain America type, but a little bit of an edge. I guess Rick Flag Rick Flag is the leader type, but he likes guns, and he's got a little bit of an edge. And I feel like Marshall's got a little bit of an edge because all the characters, to some degree, have mental illness. Like like something that like if it completely transformed you into a metahuman, there was a price to pay mentally.
Right. in our role playing game, and I will be hinting at this in my comic because it's an imperfect technology, and because humans weren't ready for this technology yet, and what they're doing is they're literally drawing power from a source that's affecting their brain, and it starts to like one day you have aquatic powers, you swim through the ocean, and then you exert yourself too much or whatever, and then like I'm the king of Atlantis.
Right.
The problem with that metapsychosis is you are superhuman and your thoughts are superhuman, so you could literally start to transform the world. I'm giving away too much of my comic right now.
Right.
But there's actually like dangers of being a superhero.
By the way,
you can cause stars to go nova. Like this to me explains Dark Phoenix. She went metapsychotic, and that's been a struggle in our games. Is there's actual die rolls, and you it's not necessarily you turn into a villain. I mean, what would be the worst? The superhero who really thinks he's saving the world through his beatific actions? That person's just as much as a menace as Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom thinks he's saving the world.
Right. By the way, Paul's character Magnum did not struggle with my weakness. He did not have cannot do the wrong thing. He was not burdened with that.
Paul's character is called Magnum, and he was 9 feet tall. And I always say, if Magneto and the Hulk merged together, you'd have Magnum. His weakness was he was so strong he couldn't control it. So, like, believe me, if I get around to doing a Magnum comic, it's going to be a weakness. Like he can't have a family. He's literally like he uses his magnetic powers to manipulate utensils because he crushes everything. He's like Midas in that instead of turning everything to gold, he turns everything into crushed powder. Argo Comics. This is Dan Sen himself.
Right, there's the man.
Cam and I played D&D, but we never played Villains Vigilantes. I said this in a live stream a week ago, and I will stand by my pledge. If my comic book makes $100,000, I'm flying everybody here for a filmed V&V session where you play your characters. So Brian Bow of Wolf and Batsy will make up a werewolf and a vampire and play. Tonic Bo will play one of his characters from what I got Rini from Fiendish. She said she'll come down. Renzo will come out and he'll be the patriarch because I have to run the game, and we will play and film it. I joke.
You got to dream big.
Making comic books is about making dreams. Oh, Dan, I still have my copy of DDs and Demigods. This is not even a joke when I say that book is the most influential book in my life. That DDs and Demigods, it got me to love Greek mythology. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it was a source book for 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons that explained all the mythological society, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, whatever. And I made it my mission to read about all of the characters in that book. It got me to love Lovecraft, Fafton Grave Mouser, Elric of Melnibone, that Jimmy and I still talk about to this day. Oh, Christian Darber, not Clarence. Oh man, it's funny. Shows you.
No, wasn't he? Did he change the name somewhere along the line? Because I remember.
Darber. You're not Mandela affecting me. Yeah, women considered Marshall Strong dreamy. Yeah,
No, that was. I think they were into Magnum as he was the player.
Right. Magnum strangled a kid with his own belt. Yes, and an adventure that had me and Mike and Jimmy going like this. There was like a moment of silence. There was a kid who had mental abilities that he could manifest evil versions of the Fantastic Four. He called himself Fantastic Boy, and he pretended to be the victim. Oh, they're capturing me! So he would play up on the fact that he was an evil little kid, and I made him to be evil, and I made him to be scary. And after fighting this evil version of because the Fantastic Four are my favorite. So after fighting an evil Fantastic Four and finding out that they could just be respawned, Marshall Strong was like, it's the kid. The kid's making this. He's tricking us all. So Paul did the most efficient thing and strangled a little boy with his own belt. Yeah.
By the way,
he lost a charisma point or two for that. Yes.
By the way, in the gaming world, not in the comic book world,
right? In Minecraft,
Marshall Strong has killed more villains than anybody by accident.
Right.
Like, how many episodes do you think you're rolling? You just think you're
Yeah, I spent 2 hours making up a character sheet only for Marshall Strong to crush his head in with a
right, and then like
critical hit punch.
I remember there was a character, I don't want to give anything away if it's in later episodes, where Marshall put his fist and it went through the guy's back out his chest, and he said his heart went flying across the room and splattered on the wall. I was like, ooh, that'll teach me to roll a 1.
In Villains and Vigilantes, a 1 is the best roll, and a
Right.
20 is the absolute worst roll. So
Marshall's
and then I house ruled it that a 1 is double damage, and a 20 doesn't matter what is a critical failure. And I tell you, man, it's the best rule I ever made up, because when you roll a 1, everybody stands up and cheers, high fives each other, and when you roll a 20, everybody has nervous laughter.
Uh-oh.
What is the situation? You know what I mean?
Something bad's going to happen.
Movies cause so many great story plots and fun little. I think, without being contradicted, I think we all remember more of the 20s being rolled than the 1s.
Bye, kids.
Yeah. Hey, Hojo's here. Hojo is it has a comic, The Mythicals #2. I think it's still active right now. I don't know if it's true, but if I say it enough, it will become true. I was the first backer of Mythicals #2. Hojo's a great guy. His comic is real interesting. It's it's a team of like supernatural beings. I highly recommend it. If Marcus is still around, maybe Marcus could find the link and throw it up. So I wanted to get back to what was his name? Deacon Hammer.
Deacon Hammer, right?
So tell us about Deacon Hammer.
Well, Deacon Hammer is so far, he's the only character in my universe that uses magic. And his origin was that he started off as a police officer. And then he's basically everything he's done as a police officer was to serve his community. And then one day, he's second guessed when he has to take action, and all his years of serving the community are out the window as police, as he becomes the poster boy for defund the police, and in the universe of that John Bua created, that he comes from, it's kind of unknown as to if he believes it's magic, or is he just mentally ill, and it really is the same powers that the other heroes have, but he believes it's magic, and he acts as if it's magic. So he's a bit of a weirdo, and he's going to make and he makes an appearance down the road as well. I was happy to include him.
Would I be spoiling anything if I said what happened on his first and only adventure?
No, go ahead.
So Mike made the character. He was so happy, so proud, and it was like, Mike, venture, do something different. And Mike,
this is a very different character for me.
Right, Mike likes a straightforward fighting character.
I like Captain America
fighting character, but he's got a cool gauntlet that lets him transmute everything. And like Kid Nemesis, I remember, like he would grab the air and transmute it into acid. So as he was throwing a punch, people get punched and then sprayed with acid. It was such a cool character.
Martial arts.
Right, so martial arts. And then you made Deacon Strong, and you were so proud of him. He was so different, and he got killed on the first adventure.
He was killed in me. I was like, never did I spend so long developing like how his powers worked.
I had a theory behind him, and you were like, "This is his craziness." Like nobody wanted to deal with the craziness that I installed into every character because it was part of the campaign. Right. You were like, embrace the craziness,
right? And I thought, is it supposed to be that he's manipulating magical energy, or is he just mentally ill, and he has this power from the same alien technology that the others have? Right. And I had this. I remember making up the sheet, and never had I written so much explaining how his powers, and he was killed like 15 minutes later.
Yeah,
but he lives in the comic.
Well, we never finished because that was pre you getting married, and everybody, and then Jimmy's job just demanded so much. But if you remember,
against the Zomborgs,
no, his body was found encased in like this amber-like substance, preserved.
Oh, right.
And we never finished that subplot. because life gets in the way.
I got married and had 2 kids. that's fine.
Oh, here we go. Scariest character ever, John Q. Public.
I gotta say what's going to be coming at some point as a backup story in one of the future books, hopefully, that continue working with Dan, and is I want to have it. I have is it 6 or 7? I don't know if it's 7 or 8 pages. I have a John Q. Public story completely drawn, inked, and colored.
I have to say, for a guy who doesn't like to role play, you scare the crap out of everybody when you play John Q. Public.
John Q. Public was fun because now I understand. You know how actors, they always seem to win Academy Awards for playing someone who's crazy, and you could see how like they would be when a character is presented to them who's nuts. It's a chance to get some attention as an actor, I would think. I felt the same way playing, John Q. Public. It was very freeing to have a character who doesn't have to. There's a thread of logic that runs through it, but he's nuts, and so you can do things that make no sense, and he lives in his own world. I guess to some degree, borrowed a little from Rorschach. I borrowed a little from The Question.
I was going to say this is definitely your homage to Steve Ditko's Mr. A in Rorschach.
Right.
And The Question when it was used by Steve Ditko. And
Jimmy was Blackjack in that adventure, as I recall.
Every once in a while, I'd get a wild hair, and I wanted to like all of when we played the Villains Vigilante, all the stories were set in the same universe, but sometimes the focus would be something different. So Marshall Strong was like the Captain America and the Avengers, those guys.
Right.
But the John Q. Public and Blackjack, this was
the street level character.
Street level. So this was the Punisher and
Daredevil.
Daredevil was even too powerful. These guys literally had no powers.
Right. Yeah. No one had any
normal humans that just use skills.
And
you describe your costume.
Well, the costume, he basically was supposed to look like Michael Douglas in Falling Down.
Right.
And he has just that a featureless mask that he wears. He's got the tie and the button shirt and the and that clear kind of mask with no features. And what I liked about
him, I remember you talk and the fog would come up, like you described the fog coming in the costume.
Yeah, what I liked about him too was that since they have no powers, one of the things that he prided himself on was his ability to use household objects to do horrific injuries on people. And at the time, I had just learned there was a self-defense guy who was amazing that I went to a seminar, and one of the weapons that he recommended was a comb, a plastic comb, and he said that the injury that you could do to another human being with a comb would be so brutal that they would never recover. And I remember thinking like, that's my next character. And that old, you used to go to the barber shop and they had the unbreakable combs, the Atlas combs.
Yeah.
And there was like this kind of
it was like a cardboard sheet and they would be like sleeves.
Right. And there was like a picture of like a 1950s strongman bending the comb. I found one on eBay. I have it hanging up here. And that is in the backup story. So I'm very pleased with that.
And the thing about it is, like, John Q. Public would have the bad guy, like, it's like, oh, you think you're getting away? Well, you're going to tell us everything you want. You know how I know this? Because I have a comb.
Right. By the way, that comic that was done as part of that was one of the reward levels on one of Dan's Kickstarters. Dan sends Kickstarters for Thunder Zone. They had one of the reward tiers was, make your own. He has an artist that's going to do like a 6-page story for you, if you back this reward tier. So I saw that and I said, I just jumped right at it, I thought it was very creative to include that. That's one of the things I like about Indiegogo, Kickstarters, the crowdfunded things that I've gotten some tremendous art and extras, through I miss going to the comic book store every week like I used to in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. But the one thing about the crowdfunded books, it just does create some opportunities for some fun extras that you would never otherwise get.
All right. Yeah. So I'm just having a fun time talking about all the different. Like we had a Western. Like
the Weird West.
Yeah, we had a Western stories. Everyone. My friend Jimmy Griffin over here. His character was Red O'Grady, who, if I make it, will be showing up in. I not to be mean to Mike, but I always said out of all the characters I've ever encountered in role playing, I think Red O'Grady is the one most worthy of a novel. It's just such an interesting, fun character. Started out
if Jimmy was playing him, I could see that. That
started out as the redheaded stepchild. That was his origin. He was unwanted. He was beat by his dad.
I'm trying to think what my character's name was.
Cole Pershing.
Cole Pershing. You got out. I love that name. Cole Pershing. That's
in our world. Your character was the inspiration for the Lone Ranger.
Right, and by the way, my character Commando, which came later, right? Commando came later, is a direct descendant of Cole Pershing in my comic universe.
One of your first stories, if you remember, you fought a werewolf and you had to make silver bullets, and that's what started the legend. And your character was a Texas Ranger after the dissolution of the Texas Ranger. So you wandered the earth like a Ronin. So you were like, and I just had so much fun coming up with these stories. Paul actually has a real practical question, taking us back down to earth. Could you guys talk about print versus digital and pros and cons of each? What you prefer since you are just starting out? You want to answer this, Mike?
Well, all the comics are always made available. Like on these Kickstarters, a lot of times they have the digital option, and the advantage of the digital option is that it's inexpensive, so it allows some people who because the nature of crowdfunding is the books are more pricey than you would be paying in the store. Although these days, the average book, who would have ever thought books would cost $5 and $6,
right,
on the newsstand? But digital allows you to buy it more inexpensively. And if you're used to using your iPad, for your reading, it's nice. As an old school collector, I always like the print just because it's something I can hold, and that's how I grew up, reading it. I do like having the digital in addition to the print, just because it allows me to share it with other people sometimes, either at work or relatives or friends. I mean, I don't carry the comic book around with me all the time. I'm not going to walk around and, hey, have you seen my comic? But if when something's digital, it's easier to share on your phone or your iPad. But
right here,
as a guy who's been collecting since essentially '77, I need the print, just to have.
Right. So I brought up your campaign page. I'm going to expand this to make it bigger so we can see everything.
Okay, cool.
So here we have your campaign page, and we'll start at the top. So this is on Kickstarter. It's available now. 21 more days to go. You already hit your goal, so everything's happening. And this is Thunder Zone.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Thunder Zone is Dan Sen's
right. It's his
own series.
Yeah, it's his imprint where he publishes not only his stuff that he writes, but also has other creators, and literally, like I was saying before, from around the world. Supercross, Jerry Hines writes. He's in Singapore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. He teaches art, and he also does stand-up comedy, which I thought was very cool. And and writes his own book. And it's just interesting. Elton Tomasi, who is the artist on the Big House Blues, is from Brazil. So he has creators that from England and from Spain. just people that he's networked with and gotten to know through his many years in the comic, indie comic business. And he created a label kind of almost like his idea of Image,
right?
Of creators coming together and working together to put out stuff. And that's the first piece of work, artwork I had done.
Oh, yes. So
if you scroll down,
this is the 5 comics that are being offered, but you can pick and choose. You can get all 5.
Right. You get a discount if you buy all 5, and you can buy them individually. This is the first piece of artwork that I had done by artist Elton Tomasi, who did my book. And Elton has told me that he fell in love with the Marshall Strong character. He loves drawing him. And I love this cover. This cover I designed, believe it or not. I remember sending him the description of Marshall in a desperate situation, and we see the silhouette with the samurai sword of the Secret Shogun. By the way, I have to give John Bua credit. The Secret Shogun is John's villain, one of the cooler, many cool villains, but one of the cooler ones he came up with. And I just love this picture. It captures,
this guy has
a desperate moment.
I'm not even joking. He must have about 10 pages of backstory that you don't even know yet, and you're making a comment.
Right. And if you scroll down, you'll see this is now here we see the Oni down in the right-hand corner. Above him is the Spartan, and then there's Paul's. This is Jimmy's character is the Oni, and right now you're on Magnum, which is Paul's character. That's Kid Nemesis. This is Startide, who is Eric's character.
Right.
Eric played with us many a time, and that's Deacon Hammer. And there's Marshall in the middle. I thought this was a cool variant cover. This is the variant cover that Elton did. It's like what he described as kind of like the modern style of covers these days, and I think it came out fantastic. And I love the
nice colors.
Right, and this is the first page here. This is Marshall Strong lying in a field. You see the castle of the Secret Shogun in the background, and Marshall, having been blown out of the top floor window, is lying unconscious in the field. His eyes open, and he wakes up screaming. And you alluded to it earlier. There's the wounds on the legs.
Yeah,
the sword of the Secret Shogun.
I remember when you were telling me that when you first got Marshall Strong drawn, you left and then you came back. Could you put stars on his gloves? Like,
I love the stars on the gloves, and the bulletproof vest, and I like that. I have the extra buckles on the vest. Don't really need them. I just like it overdone.
It looks good.
The colors are by Alan Faria, who has done a lot of work for Dan and is a tremendous colorist. He's friends with Elton Tomasi. They work great together, and I love the way it came out. I love the opening scene like that.
So to answer Paul's question, here we have for $10 you could get a copy of Marshall Strong. This is print, so you're getting a physical comic. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to pay shipping also. So $10 goes to Mike and Dan, and whatever the shipping is goes to shipping.
Right.
And then for $5 you could get a digital. Now, what is the difference? Well, that's up to you. A digital is you're going to get a PDF high resolution file that you can read on your phone, your iPad, your computer, but I was against it. I have a digital tier in my comic also. I was against it, but then I realized it's just, some people just can't afford it, especially overseas.
Right.
And then kids today don't care about stacks and stacks of comics. They just want to read the adventure, and I feel you got to please your audience. So if the audience wants digital, they're going to get digital.
It's just one more option, for people, and it also allows someone who's a more casual reader, to buy it, at a very reasonable cost.
It's an easy jump on point. Is the way I look at it. Is I want to be in it for the long haul. I want to keep making heroic tales for as long as I can, and maybe somebody's like, I don't know, I don't know. So for $6 you could get Heroic Tales #1 digital, in my campaign. And then, all right, maybe when I do a campaign for issue #2, they'll buy 1 and 2 because they like it, So it's an easy jump on point. I was talking with somebody on Twitter today, and they were talking about like the price of crowdfunded comics, and I said, I just don't feel right charging more than $10 for a comic book. Ultimately, it's a comic book. It's supposed to be affordable. It's supposed to be, and
there's the $20 book and the $25 book. It becomes a tough way to be a collector.
Right. And then you add postage and handling on that and shipping, and then forget about it to Canada. Canada's next door, and it's still. So I want to make it as easy as possible. For my campaign for $10, I'm spending a lot of money making this comic, but I have a ultimate confidence that people are going to want it. When we're done showing Mike's campaign, I'll show mine, and for $10, I don't think it's a high barrier to entry. But if like I'm nobody. Me and Mike are first time creators. Can you imagine asking $25?
Right.
We never delivered on a campaign before. So I think you're doing the right thing. Making it a low barrier to entry. And we got Argo Comics, Dan, who's the man behind Argo Comics and Thunderzone. Yes, Sullivan Saudid. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
I think it was it Swad.
The John Q. Public pages in true pulp form. I got to get those to Mike at Burger King.
I got those. Yeah, we met at there was a Burger King not far from where I live. And Dan and I met numerous. That's where we had our corporate lunches.
Oh, okay.
And he brought me the original pages from that the artist did. So I have pretty much all the art from all the books because I would buy them from the artist afterwards. And in Dan's campaign that came with it, so it was nice. By the way, I want to point out that Marshall Strong is in very good company in this Kickstarter campaign. If you look at the lineup of books, I think this is one of the strongest lineups that they put out. 5 books. They all look great.
So
Nightclaw is a new one like mine.
You didn't write this. You have nothing to do with this, but it's part of the package.
And if you scroll down, some of the others books are continuations from previous Kickstarters that Dan has done. Big House Blues.
This is issue 2.
A follow-up issue. Dan wrote that. And he has Nature Man, which was a Golden Age character, Nature Boy, which Dan has said, what if he were to wake up all these years later? So it's a Golden Age character.
I really like this cover.
Yeah, they look fantastic, and we're getting towards our second stretch goal, which is another variant cover on the Nature Man and Supercross. By the way, I don't know if you can see this. This cover, which has the Commando.
Hold on, I'll make you. There you go.
You see, there's the Commando. This cover was a reward done by Jerry Hines. That was part of
yeah, hold it on that. Oh, the Commando, another one of your characters.
Yeah, and his being featured in that cover by Jerry Hines was one of the reward tiers that Dan did, and never have I been so happy to back something. And when I got this in the mail, it was so cool to see him on the cover, and I got this cool holder for it, and you can see the beautiful artwork. And this cover that they have, this cover here is the stretch goal cover, and I'm by Broderick. What's his first name? The famous artist. What's that?
Pat Broderick.
Yeah, Pat Broderick did that cover.
Yeah, Pat Broderick does my variant cover also.
So you can see he does beautiful work, and
yeah, I love Pat Broderick.
And it's cool because Supercross is a really interesting book with really different, interesting characters, and I love Jerry's art. It looks fantastic. So
good coloring too.
Yeah, so I think it's a very strong lineup of books, and I'm very happy to be part of it. Oh, and Junkyard Joe. I forgot that. That's issue number 2. And issue number 1 left off with the cliffhanger. There is a psychopathic serial killer on the loose. You see him in the background. Excellent characters, completely nuts. And I think it's, and then, you can get the back issues. By the way, you see that picture of me for the creative team?
Yeah.
Came out all right. It's I'm not exactly photogenic. I took about 60 selfies and I looked worse in every one. My wife said, I'm not letting you put that online. And she took back about 2 pictures and we found one that I look like a human being. So
there you go. You could back 1 comic, you could back 2 comics, you could get everything. And like you said, if you back a big package, you get a deal. And it's going to deliver because Dan Sen, man, how many campaigns does this guy have?
Right. And by the way, another excellent thing I got to say about Dan and Argo Comics and Thunder Zone, Dan fulfills very quickly. He doesn't do the campaign until everything is ready to roll. So when the campaign ends, the books go right to print, and then they're in the hands of the
doing this for 20 years.
Right. And a lot of guys, a lot of places that they have trouble with the fulfillment end of it. And I don't know I know it's tough. I don't know if it's from they don't plan properly or they underestimate how much work is involved. But Dan has it down to a science, and it's nice when you're back. I've found when I've backed campaigns on Indiegogo, Kickstarter, things, when there's a tremendous gap, it takes a lot of the fun out of ordering it. And when people fulfill more or less on time, it makes it more of a viable hobby. It's more fun,
Yeah.
And Dan is very good at fulfilling, and he successfully fulfills everything, every campaign he does, and you have the book in record time, which I never realized how impressive that was until I started ordering, and in some cases, literally years later, hadn't gotten the book.
Yeah.
And some books 6 months behind, and I know it's tough, and the pandemic made things a little tough, but it's Dan's expertise from years of doing this has made a big difference in him getting the book into the hands of his customers. So I know your book will be completed before it's
about 85% done right now.
Right. So and it hasn't launched yet. So
it hasn't launched yet, and I keep adding more and more stuff to it. I'm getting excited to the point where one of the guys who's doing the graphic arts and everything, he's just like, dude, you're putting too much in the comic. You got to make money.
Right.
So much fun. So I already have like bonus stuff that's probably going to go in issue 2 because there's, I got to be realistic. You know what I mean? I tend to dream too big. Like I made these Heroic Tales pint glasses months ago. You know what I mean? Like what?
Right. I'm looking forward to getting mine.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to add. I added my comic is larger than a regular. It's not as it's not like triple size like some of these square bound ones, but I think I added a 7-page flashback scene, which at the advice of Mark Polton, who puts out USA Assassin, and he did
Coney Williams
Graveyard Shift. I got on one of his campaigns. One of the reward tiers was he reviews your script. So I paid for that, and Mark, who he wrote for DC Comics at one point, he did Hawkman. He reviewed my script and he gave me some excellent feedback. And one of them, he saw a point where I could inform the reader through a flashback scene. And so my comic ended up being extra pages. So you get more bang for your buck and a more complete story. So but I know that feeling of wanting to, you know what else I could add? And you know what else I could add?
You're exactly right. Because my first comic, I was explaining the nature of the world and how superpowers, and a couple of friends were like, nobody cares. It's the first issue. Do they like your characters?
Right.
Nobody cares about the world building if they don't care about the character. So I jettisoned all of it and made, I focused on a character.
Right.
It's release of world building, drip release of world building.
It is interesting when you're writing it, you realize, it's tough to fit what you want to fit on a page, and then to fit what you want to include, because you're not filming it. Each thing has to be drawn,
right?
And it's very challenging. It was very interesting to I felt like I learned a lot.
Yeah, and like, should this be the next panel on the next page? Does this logically fit on this page? It's tough.
By the way, Cameron saying, "Wait, Mike takes criticism constructively." What are you trying to say? Sure, I'm an open-minded guy. No, but by the way, when I got that script review, I remember thinking, like it is when you put your heart and soul into something, it is tough to hear people point out any criticism.
Yeah, I just paid you, and you were supposed to say it's wonderful as is.
Right, but I went in with an open mind. I said, let me listen to the pro. Mark Polton is has a lot of experience writing, and he's written some really good stuff. And he really took his time and went through it with the fine-tooth comb. Believe me, I got my money's worth, and it made the story better, because I love the flashback scene.
Yeah, I've been talking to a bunch of people and having conversations with a lot of professionals, and a lot of them read the script and told me, fix this. This is no good. This doesn't. And I got to say, I wanted to beat them in the face. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then like a day later, I'm like, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Right. But the creative process is really fun. It's very addicting. Like,
right.
When I remember typing the script, I had written a rough draft, and I remember typing out the story, and ideas were coming to me. And then as you get into the story, more ideas come that are better. And you find, like, you don't think of everything in advance in one fell swoop.
Right.
The more you throw yourself into it, the more it takes on a life of its own.
Well, because you're also thinking, how does this person get from this room to that room? And then why would this happen? Why?
Right.
So now you're like, oh, now I need a scene of them getting in the car, or the supervillain did this,
Well, they talk about, the muse, and like the metaphysical writers talked about, like, this, you basically, you don't come up with the story. It comes to you from the universe, and you just,
right.
I know that feeling when you get good ideas, and it's almost like the more you get engrossed in it all becomes more obvious to you that you can't think of from the outside. It's that, and I would imagine those who are like professional writers who have really done outstanding work, I can only imagine the level that they're operating at.
Yeah.
Where, you think of like the great runs of comics that we both, there are authors that have great run after great run after great run. And I was always in awe, but now I'm even beyond awe at the idea that, some of they did
this day after day for years.
Right. And just killer comic after killer. I'm thinking of like the runs of the Avengers, runs of the X-Men. I've been on a vigilante kick lately. I've been, I was rereading, was it a Teen Titans Annual #2, the first appearance of the vigilante?
Yeah.
And it's just on fire, like they're just, you just, wow, these guys did this year after year on a deadline.
Right.
If I could ever come up with anything, when
because it was you and your artist, and these people had, a lot of fingers in the pot. You know what I mean? A lot of
right.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. You would appreciate this story. I've been working on this same job site for about a year now, and I take the Long Island Railroad, so I'm waiting in Jamaica for the train, and there's this huge hulking guy. And I always stand behind him because he just plows into the train and gets a seat, and I just go in his wake. You know what I mean?
Right.
I work in construction. I'm getting a seat. And so I was on furlough, so he's like, "Hey, where were you? You came back." Once it's kind of like you don't see somebody for a while, and then you see them again. Oh, how you doing? So we started talking, and he was just like, "Yeah, things are getting weird now. There's no comic conventions," and I'm like, "Comic." I didn't mention for the first time ever. I didn't mention comics. Turns out the guy's a huge comic book fan. So now we talk about comic books, and he's built like the Hulk. So today, for the first time ever, because of the earthquake in New York, I guess a lot of people went home. The train was empty, so he and I sat in a 3-seater. And guess what we talked about? Avengers 165.
Captain Fury versus.
Yeah, Mike and I have talked about this comic book since it came out. It's one of my, if not my top favorite issue of all time. And I remember Mike and I camping as kids, acting it out, jumping around, running around, drawing it, talking about it. And the funny thing is, I didn't have issue 166 for years. Right. Back then, if you missed a comic, you missed a comic.
Right.
It was before our comic book store opened up. So it was like, and you got 166 years before me. And I was like, oh, I got to read it. And I remember sitting in the hallway in your house at the top of the stairs, people running around. For some reason in my memory, there was a million kids running. Right. And I had to see how the comic ended.
Right.
And I vaguely remember you watching me read it because, spoiler alert for a 45-year-old comic, the Vision flies up above the clouds and becomes super
dense, right? Like a diamond.
And lands on Count Nefaria, and that only knocks him out for a short amount of time. That's how powerfully. I was like,
What's interesting is when I think about like modern comics, when I was at a convention last year, we went to a convention, North Carolina, Heroes Con, and I was looking through some books, and they were old comics there was like comics from the 70s and 80s and 60s, and there's amazing cover after amazing cover, and I'm looking like it's just classic covers that I'm looking at, and then I started looking through some books that were right next to them, and I was like, didn't see anything in, and then I realized, I had wandered into comics from today, and the covers suck. And like not knowing there could be a good story in it, probably not. But the covers when we were growing up, like it's like genius. Like they were exactly what a kid would look at and go, I have to know what happens in this comic. Right. Some really cool scenario on the cover. And I feel like it's lost. Like it
would also be representative of the issue inside. You'd have Superman holding a meteor, as a space alien is like has a meteor cannon, and you're like, oh my god, a space alien's got a meteor cannon, and lo and behold, that was in the comic. Now it's like
now in the comic you can just swap covers. It doesn't matter. By the way, I saw someone went to Heroes Con, one of your
Marcus,
and Heroes Con is famous for being back issue centric. That it's so many of the conventions have gotten away from comic books and have been pop culture conventions more than comic conventions. Heroes Con is a true comic book convention. The whole focus is comic books. So that was a lot of fun. And it took me back to see, like comics the way they should be,
Right. My wife, when she moved to New York from Canada, I was like, you want to go to New York Comic Convention? And she was like, yeah, okay. Just being a good wife. And we went, and she had a blast. It was, and there was a panel of like the old timers, and we sat and listened to them telling stories about like the old Marvel and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and she loved it. And then it didn't hurt that show Fringe was on, and they had a panel and got to meet so and then we went. So that was like, and then we went to the diner afterwards, and it became like a thing. We went like 5 years. The last year, I'm like, I don't want to come anymore. It's packed. Like they couldn't fit more people in with a crowbar if they tried.
You couldn't move.
Right. And the panels were all about movies and TV shows. Like there was no old school comic creators. And then like you went into like the Marvel booth, and it was just like heard you in. Like, and then like there was video games, and I'm like, there's like Marvel Capcom games. It's like, where are all the comic creators? I just didn't feel it was about comic books anymore. It was about
and I remember my first comic convention. I went in elementary school. I don't know if it was like
You took me to my first comic convention. Do you remember?
Was that the one at the Penn Plaza?
Yeah.
Because I went to one. I don't know if I was like as early as 4th grade or something, and we didn't have a comic book. I had never seen a comic book store.
Right.
And I had never seen back issues.
Right.
And when I got to the comic convention, and I'm like 4th grade, I had a moment of overwhelm seeing all these, like, I don't know if I had $20 to spend, which probably was a lot,
Yeah.
And I started like hyperventilating. My father had to pull me to the side, and I had like almost like tears in my eyes. It's like, we have hours. Take the time.
You were like a little kid going into Wonka land for the first time.
And it's funny to think about it being so overwhelming like that, because now it's a normal part of life. And we end up going to we had an excellent comic book store in our hometown, Larry's Incredible Pulp. We went to the Incredible Pulp, and you showed me that for the first time. And I don't know if you remember this. The first time you showed me the Pulp, because it was closer to your house.
Right.
It was closed. We got there and it was closed. And I just looked in the window.
Yeah, we were like little kids, like a Norman Rockwell painting.
We sat there for for 20 minutes outside, just looking at things. We're pointing to tobacco shoes on the wall, because I had never seen a comic book store before. And
I think, if I remember correctly, I think you didn't believe me that there was a store that sold just comic books.
That sounds about right. I could see that.
I'm not falling for this one. I remember walking in to the Incredible Pulp for the first time, and back issues. I was like, because you had been to a convention before. I never did. So walking into the Incredible Pulp, I was like, back issues. Independent comics, black and white comics, you know what I mean? Like, and they had like, dirty comics, like those.
They had comics there that if we had bought then would be worth. I mean, he had remember he had like Golden Age comics, like very early Marvels. I know that the original owner, the original Larry, had Action Comics #1 was there at one point. They had the one with the Submariner where he's lifting the ship. That that was there.
Mike, I tell the story on my channel. I'm not joking. At one point, Larry, our Larry, not the original Larry, there was Fantastic Four #1, there was Amazing Fantasy 15, and there was X-Men #1, $60 each.
Wow.
And I remember saying, who would ever spend $60 on a comic book? Well, me.
Now, was this like late 70s? What was this?
This was probably 79.
79. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, 79. Wow.
I
wish I had every penny I had. I should have put into.
And even back then we had $60.
Right. Or you could. Although it would have been, seen as insane at the time.
Right.
But
it's probably best that I didn't, because my John Byrne comics disappeared. I don't know where they went. You know what I mean? So definitely my X-Men #1 would have disappeared. And to this day, I would be still upset that my X-Men #1 disappeared. I'm happier that I never bought it than I bought it. And
lost it, right?
At Argos Comics, this is Dan Sen. He used to say, Cam and I used to go to Creation Comics in New York City and later a con in a building that used to be a church. Cam, can you comment on that? I'm not familiar, but I remember you took me to Big Apple Con, and I just remember me and you took. It was the first time I've ever been to Manhattan. It was the first time I ever took a Long Island Railroad, and I'm like, my mom's letting me go to. I must have been 14. She's letting me go to the New York City to a comic convention, and it was great because it was Walt Simonson talking about his run on Thor. So we got the heads up on Beta Ray Bill and all that stuff before that came out. And then John Byrne gave a talk right after Walt Simonson. It was great,
It's funny, when Beta Ray Bill first came out, for some reason I was very anti. I thought it was I
was pissed.
And now I look back, it looks so awesome. Like it looks, it looks like
I quit reading Thor because of Beta Ray Bill, and I was like, and then I think I lasted about 3 months before I bought the back issues at the pulp, but I could have bought it for what, 60 cents. I think I bought it.
For some reason at the time I thought they were getting rid of one of my favorite characters.
Right, that's what I thought. Yeah, and I wasn't savvy enough to realize this.
Right, and now I look at it and it's so genius. It's like it's so interesting visually,
Yeah, I remember when Superior Spider-Man came out. Dan Slott did Superior Spider-Man, and people were outraged. I'm like, have you ever read a comic before? He's going to be Superior Spider-Man, and then it's going to be Spider-Man comes back. This is the way comic books work. She-Hulk's not going to be in the Fantastic Four forever.
Right.
Electra became Daredevil. People got outraged. I'm like, have you never read a comic book before?
It's tough to do comics for years and years and years and not make changes. Right,
you got to change it up. I got thought in mail by subscription. Yeah, I remember getting Doctor Strange by. You lived by me. I say this all the time that some comics you just couldn't get. Like I remember for whatever reason, Master of Kung Fu, Ghost Rider, and Doctor Strange were like legendary comics because they always seem to have plenty of Avengers, plenty of Fantastic Four, plenty of Spider-Man, but those three comics or like maybe they just didn't sell well and they got undershipped. Oh, what's this? I have an angry letter in the issue of Thor after Beta Ray Bill debuted. You ruined my comics. Like the story I was just talking with Tonic Bowl is I remember picking up Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 and going, they're making fun of comics. Yeah. And it was in my hand. I could have bought it. I call that my $180,000 mistake. But I see you looking around. Do you have to go?
Yeah, I better get running. I realize I've woken up the family.
Oh, okay. But it's great having you on, and love talking about this. And,
no, that was fun. I guess I hope I wasn't too all over the place.
No, you did good, Mike. I know it's nerve-wracking to be on a an impressive YouTube channel like mine.
No, but it was fun. It was
fun to talk about. We talked about your comic. We talked about our role-playing games. We talked about comics and Joe. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great.
I try to keep these an hour because people will click on an hour video, but they will not click on a 2-hour video.
Thanks, Paul.
But I had a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody in the chat. Thanks, everybody watching. Like and subscribe and all that nonsense. Marshall Strong is still available on. If you got to look under Thunder Zone.
Yeah, you could also enter. There's the link. You could also just enter Dan Sen, DAN, and his last name is SEHN, and it'll come up if you're on Kickstarter.
Yeah, and for those of you who are interested, Heroic Tales, my comic, which is, tied to Marshall Strong in that we, spawn out of the same role-playing sessions. That'll be coming up on the 26th.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, John. I'm excited.
I'm nervous. My stomach hurts when I think about it. A lot's riding on this because I have big plans, ladies and gentlemen. But a lot. Let's just leave it at a lot. A lot's riding on this. Big plans. But thanks a lot, everybody.
John, thanks so much.
Check out the comic. $5 digital tier. You know what I mean? It's an easy entry. And then 6 issues. You buy the next couple issues once you fall in love with the character, or just buy the comics. $10. And here's the link to my comic too. Thank you, and see you.
All right, John. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.